Hey guys, welcome to another interview here on my channel. I, of course, am Pixel Dan, and today I am really excited to get to talk about this particular item with this particular individual. We're going to be talking specifically about a recent Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles book that was released known as Rad Plastic, which is all about just the creation of the original Ninja Turtles toy line. It's filled with concept art and prototypes, exactly my kind of thing. And today I'm going to be chatting with the author of that book. So please help me welcome Chris Fawcett. How is it going, man?
Hey, how are you doing, Dan? Good to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you. Thank you so much for sitting down to chat with me about this book. I'm really excited to kind of dive into this a little bit. You can tell us about the creation of it, but I want to start right up front to let people know that you just launched a Kickstarter for a second printing of this book. So can you maybe start by telling us a little bit about what people can find over on Kickstarter?
Yeah, so if you want to find it easy, just go to Kickstarter and search for Rad Plastic. I'm sure it'll pop right up. So it's a second printing of the book. I already printed about a little over 1,000 copies, and those sold out pretty fast. So I wanted to do a second printing, but I wasn't sure, how much interest there would be beyond what I'd already shipped out to people. So that's why I did the Kickstarter to really gauge, how many people would want to buy a second printing of the book. And it's going right now. Today is what, July 2nd, I think. So it'll be running through the entire month of July this month in 2021 here. And the cool thing about it, it's pretty much a reprint of the first book. I'm going to do a few things, error corrections, a few things I found after the printing that, typos and stuff. But other than that, it's basically the same as the first printing of the book, except that if we reach certain levels, I'm going to have some extra funds to be able to add some bonus chapters onto the end. So I'm basically going for about 500 books is what I need to do a printing. So if we get to that level, we'll print it. And then I have some bonus levels at 1,000, 1,500, and 2,000. So if we reach those, we'll get additional chapters. So they'll just be tucked into the back of the book and make it a little bit longer. So.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I'll make sure I post a link also in the video description here so you guys can click over and check it out. But what I want to focus on is the book itself. We're going to talk to Chris a little bit about what's inside so that way you guys can get a sneak peek at it. Because if you're like me and you're into just toy history, especially on some of our favorite toy lines like Ninja Turtles, I really think you guys are going to love this. So Chris, can you just start by giving us an explanation of what this book is about and kind of what your plan was when putting together a book like this?
Yeah, so first I'll say I'm a former toy engineer. So I started my career in the toy business. My family has been in the toy business for 20, 30 years now, maybe a little more than that. So I really have this passion for the design process and the engineering and things like that. So when I was starting to put the idea for the book together, I really wanted to do something that showcased the design and the artistry, the concepts, the choices maybe that were made by the designers or the engineers, things like that. There's a lot of people that have done these books that are like encyclopedias, and I think you've actually done one yourself, Dan, if I'm correct on that.
That's
and
right.
Those are great books. I love those kind of books. There's one out there for Ninja Turtles already. But that's not really what I wanted to do. I wanted to focus more on the art and the history. So it's really, and what I've been telling people, it's more an art book than anything. It really showcases the artistry behind everything from the design of the toys to the sculpting to the packaging to the artistry, everything like that, all wrapped into this book.
Yeah, exactly. And I wanted to make sure that that distinction was there for people that don't know what's inside this. So it's not like a visual history of like the produced toys. Like that's what my Masters of the Universe book is. It's like a visual history of the toy lines. This goes much more into detail. Like you said, it's an art book. It shows concept art. It shows prototypes, not only of the things that did get released, but there's also so much unreleased stuff in there. And that stuff is so exciting for me personally. And I know that that's something that, I mean, I can see your amazing collection behind you there. So obviously the unproduced stuff and the early samples and prototypes is something that you very much enjoy as well, correct?
Yeah, both from, like I said, being in the toy industry myself and having, worked with those kind of materials in the past, but then also my collecting experience, coming up really as the Star Wars generation and starting to collect Star Wars when I was in my college years. I I moved very quickly into that realm of Star Wars collecting, again, because of my background and my history in the toy business. So, you know, when it came to the Ninja Turtles, as I started to find more and more things, and eventually peaked in my head, hey, you're starting to find enough material here that you could probably write a book on this. You know, it wasn't that I necessarily said, I want to write a book. Let me go do the research. It kind of happened in reverse. I stumbled upon a few things and was starting to get so much material and branch out and getting contacts in the industry that I realized I would have enough material for the book. And at that point, I decided that I really wanted to write it, mostly because, you know, it's not every day you get to see these things. They're not the toys that you can go on eBay and buy. And so from a collector's standpoint, it's something that maybe you will never have in your collection, or maybe you'll have an example of a couple of these things, and maybe you'll get to see them if you visit a friend or something. But to have the breadth of what is in this book all right there in your hands is probably the only way that most people will ever get to experience it, even myself included, because there are things in the book, obviously, that I've never seen in person, that I got photos from other collectors and things like that. So to have it all in one place, I think is really great.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's awesome, because that was going to be kind of my next question, is like the process of putting together this book. But it's amazing to hear like this is just something you've just kind of been doing, and realize that you were putting together some amazing information. You've got some really spectacular photography in here showing a lot of this early production stuff. So like, how did that kind of come about, like in your process? Were you able to go and see some of this stuff in person and like photograph this stuff, or is it like a mixture of already existing reference photos? Or can you kind of speak on how you just assembled all of that?
Yeah, so there's really, I would say, you know, a couple different sort of buckets that those fall into.
Sure.
First of all, there's like the 2D art, which includes, you know, anything concept design, but also pages from the Toy Fair catalogs. Those obviously were easy to get, even from people I contacted that were remote. They could just scan them and email them to me. Some of them I was able to get and acquire, scan them myself, and I was able to get a copy of all the Toy Fair catalogs and scan those. So that's sort of one bucket. The second bucket would be things that other collectors contributed to the book, photographs. There's very few in there, actually, maybe a handful, 5, 6, 7 of those. Everything else in the book that's, I should say one more thing. There's another bucket that is from the original photographers on the line that did packaging photography.
Oh, very
I did
cool.
get quite a few like slides and negatives from them. And I would say there's probably 20, 30 or so images directly from the photographers on the line in the book. And then the last set is the largest set, which is photographs that me or my crew that helped me research this book actually took ourselves. So the vast majority of the things that are photographs in that book were either taken by myself generally, or Matt George took some. And my other two contributors, Stephen Ward and Gary Borbidge, probably have a few in there as well. But I would say like probably 80% of the photos in the book I took myself.
That's amazing. So you got to like see this stuff in person, and
Yeah.
like, how exciting is that?
Yeah, I get to, you know, I traveled all over the country, obviously a lot out to Los Angeles, because that's where Playmates Toys US division is headquartered. And a lot of the people that worked on that line are still in and around that area. So I took a lot of trips to LA, hauling my light box around. Sometimes I'd haul my SLR camera. Sometimes I just use my cell phone, which actually the iPhone takes great pictures. There's a lot of
Isn't that
pictures.
crazy?
Yeah, it really does. I'm like, by the time I was sort of through the end, I'm like, why am I messing with this SLR camera and taking raw photos and manipulating? I'm like, the iPhone ones just come out looking great. So I started using that more and more. But yeah, I'd haul that all over the place and get the photos of everything that you see in the book.
That's amazing. That is so much fun, man. That's the kind of stuff I just geek out over too. Like just getting to see that stuff in person and like the history and everything. It's so cool.
Yeah, and being able to talk to the artist, that's, generally the artists that kept these, it's largely because they worked on them to some extent. So to hear their stories behind, this toy is, one of my favorites, or this one I hated, or I always thought this was dumb, but they wanted to do it, so I did it. Those kind of things you hear. And then, just the excitement of, a lot of times you'd go in and not have any idea, what we were going to see. And so you'd be, get your foot in the door and get invited over to someone's house or their business, and they pull out some boxes and you're starting to go through them to see what's cool in there, and just being surprised is like, by what you're finding is one of the most amazing feelings.
That is so amazing. And one of the things you just said really sticks out to me, because I've had similar stories. Like, you're talking to some of these creators that worked on some of these original lines, and they'll say things like, oh, it was the dumbest thing, or you know, like, I was just doing what I was directed to do or whatever, and had no idea that it was going to be something that 30, 40 years later, guys like us are sitting here like we've got this fond memory of these things, and they might have thought it was a dumb gimmick at the time or something. I love hearing those stories.
Those are hard ones where you're like, you pull something out, you're like, oh my gosh, this was one of my favorite figures, and the guy's like, I hated that one. Oh, just stuck my foot in my mouth, and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to compliment you on the sculpt because I really love it, even if you hate it. But it's like super awkward when that happens.
That's amazing. Do you have any standout like stories that you can think of off the top of your head that might be fun to share?
Oh man, there's just so many.
I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but
yeah, there's just a ton. Probably you know, there was a couple that were really a lot of stuff in one place, I guess is the best. I can't think of a better way of stating that. But probably would be the very first set of stuff that we discovered is probably one of the best stories. It was someone I had talked to years and years ago, and finally he called me up and said, hey, my children are going to start college next year, and you know, I'd been asking, you know, for a while, you know, kind of come dig through all this stuff in the basement and everything, and not really having any idea what was down there. And he said, I think it's, you know, finally time maybe to let some of this stuff go, because I, you know, kids going to college, I might think about moving out of this house, not too far future. And the basement was just, I mean, this basement was stacked, the entire perimeter, floor to ceiling, with Tupper, you know, those Rubbermaid bins.
Right.
So we went down there. It was you know, me and Matt George, Gary, Stephen Ward, my wife went as well. And you know, we had no idea what we were going to find. And one of the first, you know, we pulled out a bunch of bins, and it's like, oh, here's some NASCAR stuff. Here's some toy horses. here's some Barbies. I'm like, oh, this is going to be like, I'm like, keep looking, because just keep looking. And then one of the very first sort of super cool thing, really, I think it was the very first box where we pulled something out. We're like, oh, this is going to be interesting the rest of the day. Was Gary pulled out a box, and I don't know if you've ever seen it, but a lot of the sculptors use these brown boxes. They're about like this big, and they have these little fold over metal tabs to hold the lid on. And those are used by a lot of people that I've seen in the industry. So we find a box and pull one of those out, and we're like, ooh, you know, that's the clue that maybe there's something that's a sculpting in here. And Gary opens it up, and he pulls out the original sculpt for the creature from the lagoon, Leo, from the Ninja Turtles line. This you probably can't see him very well, but this guy right here. Yeah, and it was funny, there weren't that many sculpts at that place, but to be like the first piece we found was an original wax sculpt. It was like, we were like, oh my God, like, and then we, of course, after looking at all the Barbies and the horses and the NASCAR stuff, now we're excited, right? Because it's like, oh man, there's some really great stuff here. So that was probably one of the biggest sort of surprise moments, because the other ones were, you know, we pretty much were targeting the Ninja Turtles stuff for the book. And so we knew sort of what people, at least a rough idea, what people might have had before going over there. But that one was the one that was the complete and utter surprise that all this Ninja Turtle stuff was at that place. So that was a pretty exciting day.
That is so exciting. Very cool. So I want to talk about some of the things, and you're like, I flagged a couple pages in the book that I love, stand out to me. You've got some sample pages up on the Kickstarter. I know one of them that's there is like the first turtle, that original turtle sculpt. Is that something that was like already an existing photo, or have you actually gotten to see that thing in person?
Oh, you mean this one?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, this is, hopefully that's in focus and in frame. Yeah, this is, you know, there was 2 turtles they did before Playmates decided to take the line. Actually, this is the one that everybody knows about, but there's another pitch turtle that is I've never seen in person. I've only seen a couple photographs of it that was completely different. This one was sculpted by Varner Studios. The other one was done by an outfit in Cincinnati. This one sort of won off, I guess, versus the other one. And so they cast a bunch of these and painted some of them up. I know of 3 painted ones that are still in existence. I know they made more than that because I've seen some photographs of some of the pitch meetings where there's some other ones with slightly different colors than what I've seen. But this one is a Donatello. He looks fairly blue, but it's actually just a almost bluish shade of purple. So yeah, this is, and there's quite a few of these unpainted ones that are still out there in existence, but this is a painted version. So yeah, pretty cool to see that original sculpting.
Oh my God, that's amazing. I'm sitting here geeking out right now just looking at you holding it. That is so cool.
Yeah, that's probably my pinnacle piece of the whole Ninja Turtles collection right there. I mean,
was gonna say that's like prize piece right there for a collection.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
incredible.
Yeah, you don't get much better than that, like a painted pitch turtle.
So I wanted to, like, one of these early pages in the book I really love, just shortly past that, it shows some of the original design sketches for some of our main characters like Shredder and the Foot Soldiers and Bebop and Rocksteady. Shredder and the Foot have a very much more Mirage look to them. And then of course, these early designs for Bebop and Rocksteady are absolutely incredible. They've got like the dark, almost black color scheme going on. Like Bebop's got some like spikes on his shoulder pads. I love seeing some of those original designs like that, and really kind of plays into that whole idea of this being an art book, right? You got so much great concept artwork in there.
Yeah, there was a lot. That first chapter, especially, all the pre-toy launch stuff in that first chapter that shows all these different concepts that they had considered. Some of them are pretty out there. They had originally, and the idea for the bad guys was that the good guys would all be the turtles and the animals, and the bad guys would all be humans.
Oh.
Because, from the original comic, that's kind of how it was, right? You had the Foot and Shredder were humans. But then at some point they came up with this idea. They thought it actually came, I think, from one of the guys that worked on the cartoon that suggested that, hey, why don't we do other, like pretty much everybody kind of as mutant animals, and let's make some bad guys as mutant animals. And they explored some ideas there and came up with the Bebop and the Rocksteady as some of their villains, because they really needed to fill out the villain line. Because when they started this, Playmates, they had the 4 turtles, they had April, they had Shredder and a Foot Soldier. So you got 5 good guys, 2 bad guys. They wanted to fill out a couple more bad guys. So that's where they decided to do the Rocksteady and the Bebop.
And what a great move that was, right? I mean, because like Shredder's
really
cool. Yeah, Shredder's cool, but like what makes the Turtles line so great? It's all the weird mutants, all the weird wacky designs. So that's such a great move. And of course, Bebop and Rocksteady have gone on to be such beloved like main characters. Like everybody immediately thinks of them as Shredder sidekicks now. So great move. In that first chapter, one of the other things I wanted to show, there's like this early concept art for the sewer home. One of my all-time favorite play sets, but it's such a weird idea. The face, this weird like face that was going to be like this, I don't know, this being that like guided the turtles. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was some kind of pseudo deity thing that it was mystical. And they also had another thing where like there was this living ooze, that the ooze was going to be alive actually and be a character, like the ooze itself would be a character. So there was some talks about going down that route as well. In the end, I think they decided it's like, Splinter's already the mentor type sensei, wise old character trope that's in a lot of mythologies. Why do we need a second one with this face? And it was a little weird. I mean, this big face that was just sort of on the wall.
Yeah.
So they just sort of put that role back where it belonged, I think, onto Splinter, and did away with that weird concept.
See, this stuff is amazing to me. Like, I didn't even know anything about that before. I love learning about just the ideas that they were tossing around and what didn't make it through. I think that's so cool. It is so cool. I want to skip ahead now just to kind of show some examples of like what some of the pages look like for some of the figures that did get released. One of my all-time favorite characters is Muckman, and showing his page here. There's some really great concept sketches of like just the design process of Muckman, as well as seeing like the wax and like a test shot with the multicolored pieces on there, but gives you a good idea of just some of the stuff you see in there. But I love seeing the concept art, like the development of the creation of this character.
Yeah, and I had other sketches for Muckman that I couldn't fit in there. I think I photoshopped that part out, but those sketches were labeled like A, B, C, D, E. And because I'm also labeling photos in the book A, B, C, D for my little index in the about reading about them, I photoshopped that out. But I think there was 5 or 6 or 7 of those sketches for Muckman. They weren't radically different from one another, so I picked sort of the 3 that I felt were the 3 that were as disparate as possible, and the other ones were sort of variants on the ones that you see there. But yeah, there were definitely more sketches than even what I show in the book. And you know, that's brings me to another point. It's like I had to, it was really hard to pick what I could put in and what I had to keep out, because I knew from the beginning I was shooting for about 400 pages, and before too long I realized I had more material than I could fit in 400 pages. So I did have to cut some things, and some of that is things like that 2D art that I was like, well, I got 6 of these, let's put in 3 of them.
That is amazing. It's so crazy to think about all that stuff out there and that it all still exists too.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I've always kind of come across in my years of looking at this stuff is so much of that stuff just got thrown away, right? And it's amazing that you've come across so much of it still there and intact. Like a lot of those guys, I mean, it was just part of the job or whatever. So when they were done with it, it went in the trash bin, you know, and it's so sad to hear those stories. So I love that you were able to recover so much.
So I'll tell you a good story in that regard. Is similar. There's one person I talked to that worked at one of the design houses that did some of the. They basically did the first series card art, and you can kind of tell if you look at the card art. Those first ones were pretty rough. They were done in like colored pencil, and magic marker. Oh. And later on, they started to get into acrylics. And if you look at the card backs and the over time, like look at the 88, you can start to see where they shifted away from this super inexpensive way of doing the art to a much more expensive, which was acrylics, but it looked better. And the reason why is, you know, the first years they didn't know how it was going to do. They were trying to do it as cheap as they could. So they hired this firm that was really good at markers, and they did the packaging design markers. But that firm also did a bunch of like the sticker art, like the stickers that you put on the toys and things like that. So there's this story of this lady that worked there, and you know, I called her up a while back and, you know, was talking to her about what she did and everything, and said, you know, did you keep anything? She said, well, let me tell you this story. She's like, the owner didn't really care. He just viewed this as, you know, like a lot of the business people did back then. They just viewed it as it was work, you know, when it was done and over. And you know, every couple of years you clean out your files and you throw everything away. So he had taken this big stack of artwork and basically was going to throw it out. And I guess at their small studio, they didn't have like dumpsters. They just had normal trash bins, you know, like trash cans with a lid on it. And she said she washed them, and he took it and he put it on the trash bin. And she said that she was so like flabbergasted that all that art would be thrown away. So at the end of the day, when she went home, you know, just picked it up off the trash can. So, you know, that's how a lot of this, some of this stuff anyway, came to be, is because people rescued it from the trash. You know, it would have gone to a dumpster. So thankfully some people were smart enough to do that. You know, some other reasons why things are around are just, you know, the artists took a copy or 2 of the thing they did home. You know, they were making hard copies off the sculpts, and, you know, Playmates wanted 5, and they'd cast one for themselves to have sort of as a portfolio piece, you know, for themselves. And so those ended up going home with people. And sometimes the executives at Playmates would have stuff that they just had in a box and just, it was in the garage for, you know, 20 years, and, you know, it's just sitting there. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that was kept, which is great, but there's also a lot of stuff that wasn't. Like, very, very little packaging art still exists. I know of maybe 3 or 4 or 5 pieces of packaging art that still exists. So that's kind of sad. Like, none of the really early packaging art still exists, as far as I know, that I found so far. So the really early, the first line, there's really not a whole lot, even of 3D type things for the first line. The sculpts, I know for a fact, went to Asia, to the factories, and probably are long gone by now. The sculpts for the first line, the original 4 turtles sculpts. So there's a lot that was lost to history, but
Yeah.
it's very great that a lot was kept, and then that now I was able to put it all into a format that it will be now available for everybody forever.
And preserved. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Preserving toy history. I think that's super important. And I'm really glad that a lot of that stuff was rescued and that we were able to see all of it. I think it's so great. So great. So beyond a lot of the concept stuff in the book, we've also kind of talked about how there's a bunch of unreleased stuff in here too. So I want to kind of show some of that and talk about some of that. One of my favorite pages in here, which is something I know a lot of people know about now, is the Muta party wagon. The idea
Oh yeah.
of a party wagon that was going to mutate into a giant like mech, basically has a bit of a metalhead look to it, right, with the head and
Right. Yeah, it
everything.
does.
But I love seeing some of just these unreleased items in here too. And obviously Ninja Turtles was a line that got huge and it went for many years, so of course there was a lot of concepts and stuff that were come up with that didn't make it out at the time, but it's really interesting to see the ones that made it as far as like these production pieces almost.
Yeah, that probably didn't. I don't think that went to production. Although I will say that I've been surprised even very recently about an item that I thought didn't go to production, and actually I found out they did make tooling of. I'm guessing that's probably a hand-built styrene model, a one-off.
Okay.
I've talked to some people that worked at the Toy Fair booths, and because Playmates was in Los Angeles and Toy Fair was in New York, what I've been told that most of the stuff that went to Toy Fair, a lot of it was just pitched in New York after the show was over. So I've never seen evidence that Mutavan exists. I'm guessing it went to Toy Fair because I think I've got a picture of it at Toy Fair, but then it probably went from Toy Fair to the dumpster, unfortunately, if they decide not to make it. Some of it did come back, like the smaller things, they could pack up the figures and maybe ship them back. But I know I was told a lot of the stuff at Toy Fair just got pitched at the end of the Toy Fair. They would build it specifically for that. So they didn't need it for Asia for the tooling. They didn't need it for photography in Los Angeles. They built a set just to go to Toy Fair. So once it was done, it had completely fulfilled its purpose. And
Yeah,
it's
like
like,
a
well,
prop,
do we pack it up
basically.
and ship it back for $50, or do we just throw it in the dumpster? Like they didn't need it at that point. So occasionally somebody would grab a piece and take it home, but most of that Toy Fair stuff I think is long gone.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense when you're thinking about it from that aspect. It's just a prop, because the whole
Right.
idea of Toy Fair is to like get your product into retail stores, right? The retailers are
Right.
they're buyers and they're
To
looking.
gauge interest. Yeah, to gauge
Yeah.
interest and really decide what you wanted to do for that next year, because the stuff shown at Toy Fair in February generally is the stuff for the following Christmas. So they've got, at that point, they've got a lot. The front half of the process has been done. They've done the concepts, they've done sculpting, they've done prototyping. They're really ready to sort of kick off the production tooling at that point. And it's about a 6-month process then to get that out to production. So, February out to August or so. And then September is when the Christmas sort of fall toy season really starts as far as at retail. So they wanted to get them into stores by September.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Can you tell us which one it was that you discovered actually went to production recently? You said that at the beginning.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think I have him here. Here he is.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So let me show you what page he's on here. It's a figure that was in the Toy Fair catalog. That's the only evidence I'd ever seen. Go to page 354. The only evidence I've ever seen of that was some photography, which is what you'll see on page 354. And the photography is what is in the Toy Fair catalog. And there's a few other pictures I've seen like from Toy Fair. And it's clearly a hard copy in there. It's not a production painted plastic figure. And then just about a couple months ago, this guy showed up. So this is Dr. Quig from the Next Mutation TV show. And I was stunned when this figure surfaced. It just surfaced randomly, like over in Malaysia, from some guy that buys just containers full of old scrap toys. So who knows how it got there? It didn't come from any Playmates contact or anybody that worked. It just came from some random lot of random toys that came out of Asia. So it's the only one I know to exist, but because it went to tooling, and this is a first shot, clearly in weird colors, You know, they wouldn't even turn the production machines on if they weren't going to run at least like 50 of these. So I would guess at some point there were, you know, 50 to 100 of these that were made. Whether they're all ended up in landfills or whether there's still a few more out there, who knows? But yeah, this was a like one of those mind-blowing moments where you know, I was convinced this thing did not go to tooling, but then wow, here it is. So
That's
that's
amazing.
Cool. This happened recently. Yeah, this was just like a couple months ago.
And here he is in the book too, for everybody that wants to see just that painted, that hard copy.
Yeah, the painted one's really cool looking. Kind of morbid and bloody, like he has just been operating on somebody or something.
It makes you wonder if it would have actually looked like that if it got released, right?
They might have toned it down. Who knows? Yeah. So, but the only thing I've ever seen of this figure is a couple photographs from Toy Fair and the toy catalog, which is in the book, and then this one first shot.
That is unbelievable. That is so cool. It's exciting that there's still things to discover out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, yeah, you know, 2 months ago, you asked me, like, was Quig made? I'm like, no, that never went to tooling. I would have told you 99% certainty that never went to tooling. And then here I am completely wrong. So it is amazing what you find.
Absolutely. You know? Absolutely. One of the last things I want to show just in the book as an example. Now, this is something else that I know has come to light a lot recently, and a lot of people have been talking about it even since your book has come out. And I know that the artist Michael Dooney shared some of these concept sketches on his Instagram, but the pitches for things like the Star Wars turtles is so incredible to me to see just some ideas of like things that they were thinking of, things that they had pitched for other licenses. Like there's an Indiana Jones in here. There's an E.T. in here. I mean, some of the things that they were conceptualizing and like almost thinking, what if, you know, like the Star Trek turtles obviously are a thing that happened and they were awesome. So it's an easy idea, like a transition to think, oh, Star Wars turtles would have been so cool looking.
Yeah. Yeah. Those concepts we found those actually. I don't know if Dooney has the originals. I know, you know, Dooney has, I think, a large archive of a lot of his art. Right. If he does have them, they're probably buried. But yeah, those were discovered by us. And Matt George actually had one of the original sculptors for the line go ahead and make new sculptings like within the last year, just because he wanted actual 3D. And somehow that got picked up like a month or two ago. That got picked up and like just went, you know, a little bit viral for a while. And there's all these sites, comicbook.com and Screen Rant, we're all posting these stories about this that basically originated at Matt George's Instagram feed and then went through a couple people and started getting picked up by some of the, you know, geek news outlets. And so that was pretty cool to see. It's like, you know, all these things suddenly getting shown. I'm like, yeah, that's great. We found those things. Like that was part of our research to discover those drawings. And when we first turned them up, that was one of those amazing moments. We're in this room just looking through paperwork in this office, and this employee was like, yeah, there's some paperwork in here. We started pulling stuff out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's Star Wars Ninja Turtle concepts. I'm like, I couldn't believe it, you know, that even was a thing that they had thought of. So that was a really fun moment when we discovered those. And that's interesting thing, you know, there were a few times out in our research that I pulled out my phone and filmed stuff because I thought, I don't know what's going to happen, but this next 10 minutes might be interesting.
Right.
And that's one of the ones I filmed. So I have that film, the moment where we found those things. I have /Rad Plastic. Scroll down a bit. You can see the video of us actually discovering for the first time those drawings.
That is amazing, dude. That is so incredibly cool. And you're right, because it kind of did like blow up a little bit. I had so many people messaging me like, oh my God, did you see these Star Wars prototypes for Ninja Turtles? And it's like, well, I mean, those are customs, but you know, this artwork is amazing. And the artwork is in this book. So
the artwork is original. The artwork is from, you know, the 90s. The 3D figures are modern customs. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so cool. See, there's so many really amazing things that you were able to cultivate and put together in this book. So I'm happy to see it's getting a second printing, and I hope a lot of people that are interested in this will jump at this opportunity to back it on the Kickstarter and get themselves a copy. And you did mention at the beginning that I think there's some stretch goals that you have in mind, right? Where you're going to even add some more to it if you get to those points.
Yeah, exactly. The first one is they're all going to be maybe 10 to 15 pages. I have to just basically go through my archives and pull out things. And there's been some new things I've found since the book was published that I'd really like to get into it. So yeah, 10 to 15 pages for each of potentially 3 new chapters. The first one is going to be a new chapter with some sculptings that have never been seen before. The second chapter will be generically prototypes, which could include hard copies or mock-ups or things like that, first shots. And then the third chapter, if we get there, will be some additional artwork, which would be some concept art, some packaging art, things that a few new things I found, but also some things that I didn't have the space for in the original book. So if we get to those goals, we're going to add those chapters in, and that'll be fun. And if we do get to adding all 3, a lot of people might ask, well, what if I bought the first book? Do I have to buy the second book if we get those new chapters? And my answer has been, if we can fund all 3 of those chapters, I would be willing to release like a soft cover addendum with just those 3 chapters for everybody who bought the first one. But unless we get to that like 40-page count or so, it probably really wouldn't be viable to make a soft cover version of those 3 chapters. So I'm hoping we get all the way and we can release the book and add 3 chapters, and I can do that short addendum that the previous purchasers can buy.
I hope so too. I'm excited to see the new stuff. I love hearing that you're still discovering things even after finishing the book. It's like the work is never done, right? It just keeps going.
It's not. Yeah, it just keeps going. Somebody will give me a call that I called 2 years ago and finally started digging things out, and I'll get some photos, or I'll find, they'll send me, hey, I've remembered, these 3 people also worked on it. You should try to find them, and I'll try to track them down. It really is never ending. I would say I've probably gotten through, the vast majority of the people that I really wanted to talk to, that I could find. And I mean, I talked to probably over 100 different people in the research for the book at this point in time. So it's gone pretty deep, and it's getting a little bit thinner to find, a person that either I couldn't find before or a new name that I'd never heard that worked on the line, but it does still happen occasionally.
That's awesome. That's so amazing. Very cool. Well, guys, make sure you head on over to Kickstarter and check this out for yourself. Seriously, if you are a fan of toy history, you love Ninja Turtles, I really think you're going to love this book. I've gotten a huge kick out of it. It's taught me so much, and I love it. So I'll link to that in the video description. You have the whole month of July to support the Kickstarter to get that second print run going. And I definitely think it's worth it if you're into this sort of thing and if you're a fan of Turtles. Chris, this has been amazing, dude. Sorry,
I want to say too, like even if you're not a fan of Turtles, if you're a fan of any 80s or 90s toy line, the first 2 chapters especially will give you a lot of insight into how this was done. And almost all the toy lines were done in a similar way back then. So even if you like G.I. Joe or Star Wars or Street Sharks or whatever, and just want to understand more about how toys were made back in the 90s and the 80s, it would still be an interesting book with a lot of knowledge. I really wanted to make it, it's an art book ultimately, but I also wanted to make it educational as well.
I agree with you 100%. I said it at the beginning that like it's always been so fascinating to me to like see the behind the scenes stuff in the toy industry, the concept art, how this thing is created, all these things that we have grown to love that were so important from our childhoods. It's neat to see where it all came from and just the design processes and how the industry works. So if you're just a fan of the toy industry in general, and if you're curious about any of that stuff, this book is absolutely for you. Absolutely. Well, Chris, this has been amazing. I really appreciate chatting with you and you kind of giving us some insight on the book. I want to turn this over to you. Is there anything else that you want to add before we close off the interview today?
Well, just, thanks for having me on. I really hope that everybody can go out if they're interested to the Kickstarter page. I really want to fund a second printing. I've had a lot of people asking, but as these things go, you have to have sort of a minimum order in order to get there. So I really want to get the book in as many people's hands as possible. I'm hoping to do a couple conventions in the next year or 2. One here in South Carolina, Greenville, and probably the ICCC convention out in Nashville next year. So, you get a book and you want to chat, you want to hear more stories, hit me up at one of those, and I'd love to, just have talks with the fans and see what they collect. And I just enjoy the community of it all. So hit me up on Facebook, send me messages. I really like talking to people and chatting about it. So if you want to do that too, I'm all for it.
Awesome. Awesome. I'll make sure I link to everything in the video description, the Rad Plastic website, the Kickstarter, all that good stuff so you guys can check it out. Chris, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. And guys, make sure you go and check out Rad Plastic. You're really going to love it, I promise. Thank you guys so very much for watching another interview. And until next time.